Judge mocks a defendant. The court gasps when she reveals her secret identity. Soft morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Lincoln County Courthouse, illuminating the polished wooden pews and the silent hush of anticipation that preceded a busy docket. Outside, the spring breeze swayed budding trees, but inside, a certain stiffness clung to the air. This was a place of authority and solemnity. By 8:30 a.m., people had already begun drifting in for hearings. Attorneys juggling files, plaintiffs fretting, defendants glancing around anxiously for their names to be called. A few local reporters sat quietly near the back, scanning schedules for high-profile or unusual cases. On the far side of the courtroom, a balding bailiff stood watch, his gaze disciplined, waiting for court to commence. Judge Rudolph P. Reddington presided over Department 3, widely known for running a tight ship. In his mid-50s, he had a robust frame, thinning hair combed back meticulously, and a manner that brooked no nonsense. His father had been a district court judge before him, and it was often said that Rudolph's sense of pride in his position surpassed his empathy. He demanded decorum, expecting attorneys to speak with crisp precision, and defendants to show the difference he believed the judiciary deserved. Some in the legal community admired his efficiency. Others whispered that Judge Reddington had a cold streak, a tendency to belittle or dismiss those he found unworthy. This morning, the docket looked ordinary. Minor traffic violations, small claim suits, a pre-trial hearing or two. Rumors said there was a trespassing case, an unusual child support dispute, and a half-dozen routine matters. The judge strode in from chambers at precisely 9 a.m., black robes swirling about his shoulders, benching himself with authority. The bailiff intoned, "All rise." The Superior Court of Lincoln County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Rudolph P. Reddington presiding. Everyone stood, a shuffle of feet echoing on the linoleum. "Be seated," the judge ordered. He wasted no time calling the first case, a speeding ticket violation. The defendant, a harried father, pleaded for leniency. The judge listened with apparent disinterest, lectured him on safety, and handed down a standard fine. Next case, a landlord-tenant dispute. The judge cut short the tenant's attempt to explain issues with mold, focusing instead on the unpaid rent, ruling in the landlord's favor. None of it deviated from his typical style. The morning advanced case by case, the clerk calling names. Outside, sunlight brightened as the day grew. By mid-morning, the clerk called, case number 20 to 31,892, State v. King. Charge of misdemeanor trespassing on private property. The bailiff opened the side door, guiding in a slender woman with hair pinned in a simple bun. She wore a modest gray sweater, black slacks, and carried herself with a calm composure. Her face was thin, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but she walked with her shoulders back, stepping to the defendant's podium. She had no attorney by her side, which drew a few side glances from those present. Proceeding without counsel in a criminal matter, albeit a misdemeanor, seemed risky. Behind her in the gallery, only a smattering of spectators lingered, none seemingly there for her specifically. One older woman leaned forward, possibly a local reporter. The rest mostly minded their own business, scanning phones or waiting for their own cases. Yet a faint sense of curiosity pulsed among them. Trespassing could be many things, from civil disobedience to an honest mix-up. And State v. King sounded like it might be more interesting than a simple ticket. "Ms. King, is it?" Judge Reddington's baritone carried. "You stand accused of trespassing on the grounds of Redwood Estate on April 4th. Are you aware of the charges?" He peered down at her over the rims of his reading glasses, expression stern. "Yes, Your Honor, I am aware," the woman replied calmly. The prosecutor, a junior district attorney named Mendez, rose from the counsel table. "Your Honor, the defendant was found within Redwood Estate after hours, ignoring multiple posted no trespassing signs. Security confronted her. She refused to leave until local police arrived. It's a straightforward matter. She was not authorized to be there." The judge turned to Ms. King. "Care to explain, Ms. King?" She folded her hands on the podium. I was at Redwood Estate for personal reasons. I did see signs, but I believed I had a right to be there. Or, at least, it was my moral right. I left when the police said, though I was not violent or anything. A slight frown flickered on the judge's face. Your moral right? Redwood Estate is private property. Unless you had permission from the owners, you were trespassing. Are you disputing that? She paused, seemingly choosing her words. I'm not disputing that I was on the property, but there are circumstances that Judge Reddington cut her off. Circumstances that what? The law is clear. If you're found on private property with posted signs, that's trespassing. This isn't complicated. Did you speak to a public defender? She shook her head. I prefer to represent myself. The judge's lips curled in a hint of disdain. Very well. You risk mishandling your defense, Ms. King. The maximum penalty for misdemeanor trespass might be small, but it's still on your record. I advise you to reconsider a lawyer. She only repeated, No, thank you, Your Honor. He exhaled, rifling through documents. Fine. The estate's caretaker pressed charges, so we have to proceed. Ms. King, do you have any defense? Because right now, it appears open and shut. She drew a breath, looking up at the bench. I have a reason, but it's personal and complicated. I ask for leniency, Your Honor. A flicker of annoyance crossed the judge's face. Leniency? On what basis? She hesitated, glancing around as if uncomfortable, revealing details. On the basis that Redwood Estate used to be my family's property. I had reason to believe. The judge barked a laugh, short and harsh. Your family's property? Redwood Estate belongs to the Farnsworth Family Trust. It's been that way for decades, from what I know. Are you claiming you're Farnsworth? A few onlookers stirred at that name. The Farnsworths were wealthy old money in the region. Redwood Estate was a historical mansion. Ms. King's claims sounded improbable. The woman's cheeks flushed. I am not Farnsworth, but the judge rolled his eyes. Then you have no claim. Are you spinning fairy tales? Let me guess, you read a rumor about hidden wills, or you wanted to rummage around for valuables. This court does not entertain such fantasies. He cut a dismissive gesture in the air. If that's all, we can move to sentencing. Trespassing is a mild offense, but I see no cause to dismiss. The DA wants a small fine and community service. That's standard. We can expedite this. She swallowed, voice trembling. But I'd like to explain more. Redwood Estate was originally. The judge's scowl deepened. Ms. King, this is not a story hour. This is a court of law. If you have no tangible evidence or legal basis, we're done. I grow weary of outlandish claims. A hush fell, tension thickening. Ms. King's eyes flicked over the judge's face, as though measuring how best to proceed. Your Honor, I believe you're ignoring crucial facts. My presence there wasn't random. Redwood Estate is connected to my lineage. The Farnsworth Trust took over after. Judge Reddington smacked his gavel lightly, cutting her off. That's enough. I see no evidence to support that Redwood Estate is yours. I'll issue a final chance. Do you have actual documentation of your ownership or permission? If not, I'll accept the state's recommended plea, and we can finish. The woman's lips parted, frustration swirling in her eyes. I do not have it on me, but I can produce proof if given time. The judge sighed loudly. I suspect stalling. Ms. King, you wasted the court's time. The Farnsworth Trust are upstanding members of society. They have no knowledge of you. I'm ready to rule. I'll impose a $500 fine and 40 hours community service. That's actually lenient. The state asked for up to $1,000. A small gasp from the gallery indicated that many saw $500 as not trivial, especially for someone who appeared in modest clothes. Ms. King's face tightened, as though she was deciding something crucial. Then she spoke quietly. Your Honor, I beg the court's indulgence. The Farnsworth Trust might not know me under the name King, because that name is my married name. My maiden name is Farnsworth. A hush swept the room. Even the judge blinked. But he recovered quickly, scorn dripping from his tone. You claim to be Farnsworth by birth? That's a bold statement. Do you realize I can hold you in contempt if you lie under oath? Her shoulders squared. I'm not lying. My full name is Cassandra Farnsworth King. My father was Lloyd Farnsworth, the second son of the Farnsworth patriarch. After a family schism, my father left the estate decades ago, relinquishing claims. That's why I never publicly used Farnsworth. But Redwood Estate was originally my grandfather's. I visited to see personal heirlooms believed to still be stored there. A ripple of surprise passed among spectators. The Farnsworth family was wealthy and well-known, but lesser-known branches sometimes drifted from the limelight. The judge eyed her suspiciously. You're telling me you're direct Farnsworth blood, and that Redwood Estate should be partly yours? Cassandra Farnsworth King nodded once, expression steady. Yes, sir. Though I have no illusions of forcibly reclaiming it, I wanted to examine certain items that belonged to my grandmother. I was refused by the caretaker, who never heard of me. So I attempted to find them personally. That's the reason for my so-called trespass. The judge almost scoffed. This is quite a claim. Do you have any proof? A birth certificate, genealogy records. She swallowed. They exist. But not on me. I intended to gather them. I was arrested before I could finalize the approach. She turned to the prosecutor, voice calm. If you contact Farnsworth genealogical records or a certain attorney who once handled my father's estate, you can confirm. I can provide the lawyer's name. He's retired, but the judge banged his gavel for quiet, though the room wasn't noisy. It was simply a show of authority. We are not turning this hearing into a genealogical circus. If you are indeed related to the Farnsworths, you should have come prepared. Without immediate verification, I see no reason to continue. A murmur of disapproval filtered from some onlookers. Even the prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, uncertain if they should dismiss or investigate. The judge pressed on, ignoring them. I'll finalize the sentence. $500 fine, 40 hours of service. That's it. Cassandra's voice rang with quiet steel. Your Honor, if you pass that sentence without verifying, you risk ignoring material facts. I vow I can produce evidence. Farnsworth family records are well documented. My father was the black sheep, yes, but his lineage is undisputed. Perhaps we should summon Farnsworth Estate's current occupant. That occupant is my uncle, though he never publicly mentions me. I suspect he wanted to bury that branch of the family. If you require, I can expedite. Judge Reddington scowled, cutting her off again. Enough of your soap opera. This court is busy. Unless you present immediate, tangible proof, I see no basis for further delay. Are you done? She took a breath, jaw set. Yes, Your Honor, for now. His gavel rapped once more. Then, in the matter of State versus King, I impose the recommended sentence. Pay the fine within 30 days or face further penalties. Court adjourned for this case. He turned away, picking up the next file. A wave of shock rippled among spectators. Some expected more deliberation, but the judge was done. Cassandra Farnsworth King stood still, face taut, fists trembling at her sides. The bailiff lightly touched her elbow, indicating she was dismissed. She turned, glancing at the judge with a mix of frustration and sadness. In that moment, a single tear shimmered at the corner of her eye. Then she quietly stepped away, crossing the threshold. A hush lingered, as though the room sensed something big had just been steamrolled. Outside the courtroom, Ms. King paused in the corridor. A local reporter approached tentatively. Ma'am, that was quite the claim about being a Farnsworth. Are you serious? The woman nodded. I am. She gave no further detail, then hurried off, eyes searching as though for an escape. Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, the judge pressed on with other cases, oblivious to the swirl of whispers about Ms. King's identity claim. Days passed, rumors soared. Some local media picked up the sensational angle, Judge Mock's alleged Farnsworth heir. But many dismissed it as an attention grab. Redwood Estate's caretaker insisted they had zero knowledge of any estranged Farnsworth scion. The Farnsworth family themselves remained silent. Cassandra Farnsworth King vanished from the public eye, presumably dealing with her sentence. The judge, if he heard any talk, paid no mind. He chalked it up to delusions of a defendant unwilling to accept blame. But the story didn't end there. A week later, a hush fell on the city's social circles. An official press release from Farnsworth family attorneys announced the passing of the Farnsworth patriarch, Franklin Farnsworth, at age 92. The statement included an unexpected mention: the reading of a new will, revised only months prior, acknowledging an estranged granddaughter. The granddaughter's identity: Cassandra Farnsworth King. The family attorneys invited her to attend the will's public reading at Redwood Estate the following Friday. A surge of shock swept the region. It confirmed her claim. She was indeed Farnsworth blood. Redwood Estate didn't entirely belong to her, but she was a rightful heir in the Farnsworth lineage. Local media quickly connected the dots. This was the same Ms. King who'd been hauled to court for trespassing. Headlines blared: "Mysterious Farnsworth heir surfaces. Judge denies Farnsworth descendant's plea." The narrative that the judge had dismissed and mocked her quickly took shape. People gossiped about how Judge Reddington might react, having so blatantly disregarded her claims. Redwood Estate caretaker apologized in a short statement, admitting no knowledge of her existence, but that the Farnsworth patriarch had apparently known. Many eagerly awaited to see if Ms. King would press legal action or simply appear at the will reading. A few days after that bombshell, the Farnsworth family's official attorney, Mr. Harwood, held a brief press conference to confirm that Cassandra Farnsworth King was recognized as a legitimate heir. The press conference was near Redwood Estate gates, cameras capturing the stately mansion in the background. When asked about Ms. King's trespassing case, Mr. Harwood stated politely that once Ms. King's rights were formalized, the Farnsworth Trust would request the charge be dropped. The caretaker, who lodged the complaint, had no clue at the time of her real identity. Hence, the Farnsworth Trust intended no ill will. They wanted to rectify it. The entire city marveled at how the judge had ironically refused her plea to investigate. Another wave of speculation rippled. Would Ms. King appear in court to overturn the sentence? Judge Reddington, upon hearing these developments, reportedly grew anxious. Rumors said he tried to hide his embarrassment, telling colleagues that Ms. King hadn't produced proof at the hearing, so his stance was correct. But as the Farnsworth family's official stance emerged, validating her claim, he couldn't ignore that the entire fiasco made him look arrogant and dismissive. The local bar association murmured about the judge's inflexibility. Social media sparked with criticisms. A judge's job is to weigh evidence, not mock defendants. Some demanded an apology. The judge remained stony, refusing to comment. Finally, the matter came to a head. Ms. King's scheduled compliance hearing for the trespassing sentence was set 2 weeks after the initial hearing. She was supposed to show proof she'd paid the $500 fine or begun community service. Now that the Farnsworth family publicly recognized her, many guessed Ms. King might appear with a team of high-powered attorneys, possibly forcing the court to reverse or dismiss the conviction. The date arrived amid high anticipation, media gathering early outside the courthouse. The crowd buzzed with a sense of spectacle, anticipating a major reveal. That morning, Judge Reddington took the bench as usual. The docket progressed. By mid-morning, State v. King was called again. The bailiff opened the side door. This time, Ms. King entered with calm poise, wearing a refined but understated navy blue suit. Alongside her stood a distinguished older man in a tailored suit, Mr. Harwood, Farnsworth family attorney. The gallery parted, cameras not allowed inside, but multiple reporters scribbled notes. On the prosecution side, Ms. Mendez again represented the state. She looked uneasy, uncertain how to proceed given the Farnsworth bombshell. As Ms. King stood at the defendant's podium, the judge regarded her warily. "We're here for a compliance hearing on the trespassing sentence," he intoned, voice strained with formality. "Ms. King, have you paid the fine, begun community service?" The attorney, Harwood, stepped forward. "Good morning, Your Honor. I represent Ms. King. Before we address that, we have a motion to vacate the sentence based on newly discovered evidence of Ms. King's rightful association with Redwood Estate. We also request that the record reflect that the Farnsworth Trust no longer desires to press charges. A wave of interest rippled among the spectators. The judge's face reddened slightly. Counsel, the time to produce evidence was at the initial hearing. The state's charges. Harwood calmly presented official documents. Your Honor, these genealogical and legal records confirm Ms. King is the direct granddaughter of Franklin Farnsworth, recently deceased, which confers her an interest in the Redwood estate. We have affidavits from Farnsworth family members acknowledging she has partial rights to the property. Therefore, her presence on Redwood estate wasn't simple trespass. She believed in good faith that she had a valid claim, and the Farnsworth caretaker has since withdrawn the complaint, now that the truth is known. Judge Reddington's throat bobbed with tension. Let me see these. The bailiff passed up the thick file. The judge flipped through it, brow creasing. He paused, reading lines, verifying signatures. Silence stretched. Ms. King stood poised, expression calm. Harwood continued, we also have an official statement from the Farnsworth Trust, clarifying Ms. King's partial inheritance in Redwood estate. We respectfully request the court dismiss the conviction in the interest of justice, seeing that the underlying complaint is retracted and Ms. King's claim was indeed legitimate. The judge's lips tightened. He flicked a glance at Ms. King, recalling how he'd belittled her story. Clearly, the documents were legitimate. A lesser judge might have apologized on the spot, but Reddington's pride bristled. The caretaker's retraction and Ms. King's lineage do not automatically negate the fact that she was on posted property without the caretaker's permission, he said, voice rigid. However, it does complicate the scenario. Ms. Mendez, the state's position? The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, given the Farnsworth Trust's official statement, we have no desire to pursue the matter. The trust was the direct victim, and they've dropped the complaint. We see no public interest in continuing. The state consents to dismissing the charge. Reddington's jaw flexed. Very well, he conceded. If the state does not wish to proceed, I must consider their motion. He paused, inwardly wrestling with his ego. The entire courtroom felt the tension. Finally, he let out a stiff sigh. Case dismissed. The conviction is vacated, no fine or community service required. A hush gave way to collective exhalation. Journalists scribbled furiously. Ms. King inclined her head. Thank you, Your Honor. But Harwood wasn't done. Additionally, Your Honor, Ms. King wishes to address the court regarding her treatment in the initial hearing. Reddington's posture stiffened. We are not conducting a public forum. Ms. King lifted her chin. I only want to say I respect the courts, but I was not treated with basic fairness when I tried to present my identity. You mocked me, refused to let me show proof. You belittled me as spinning fairy tales. She paused, eyes glimmering with emotion. It was humiliating. I only hope in future you might approach defendants with more openness to their claims, especially if they request time to gather evidence. People without immediate resources can be telling the truth. I say this not for revenge, but so no one else endures that same scorn. A hush blanketed the room. The judge's face reddened. He forced composure, resisting an outburst. Perhaps deep inside, he felt the sting of guilt. Court is adjourned, he declared abruptly, banging the gavel. Ms. King and her attorney turned to leave. The spectators started, many with expressions of admiration for Ms. King. As Ms. King reached the exit, a few onlookers murmured in support. Outside, reporters pounced, cameras flashing, mics shoved forward. Ms. King simply said, I hold no grudge. I'm relieved the truth came out. Redwood Estate is part of my heritage. That's all. Then she departed with Harwood into a waiting car, leaving behind a swirl of stunned reporters. Inside the courtroom, the judge sat silent for a moment. The next case delayed as he gathered himself. A bruise to his pride. He realized how the entire county would see him as that judge who mocked a rightful Farnsworth heir. Potentially, a complaint could be raised about his conduct. Shaken, he retreated to chambers. Some staff whispered that perhaps this would prompt him to reevaluate his approach. No one knew for sure. For Ms. King, the conclusion of her case marked the start of a new chapter. She formally joined the Farnsworth inheritance discussions, though she remained reticent about big changes. Redwood Estates caretaker offered a personal apology, even offering to let her tour the mansion at her convenience. She accepted calmly, hoping to find those heirlooms she'd been after. Family letters, photographs, perhaps a cameo necklace rumored to belong to her grandmother. Public sentiment rallied behind Ms. King's story. A quiet, unassuming figure who had faced a judge's derision, only to reveal her true identity. Many citizens took it as a moral lesson, that appearances can deceive, that even in a court of law, one must keep an open mind. For Ms. King herself, it underscored the importance of standing firm, refusing to let arrogance overshadow justice. In the weeks that followed, Ms. King quietly took stock of Redwood Estate. She discovered cherished family relics, letters that bridged the gap between her father and the Farnsworth patriarch. She also found peace in forging a cautious relationship with some Farnsworth relatives who never knew she existed. The caretaker arranged for her to visit whenever she liked, the no trespassing sign still in place, but no longer applicable to her. She marveled at how swiftly fortunes can shift, one moment a criminal defendant, the next recognized heir. Meanwhile, Judge Reddington faced the court of public opinion. Some called for a formal apology, others demanded an ethics review. He maintained a stoic front, refusing media interviews. Yet behind closed doors, staff noticed a slight softening in his approach. Over time, he seemed more willing to allow defendants extra time to gather evidence, less prone to snide remarks. Though he never publicly apologized, his changed behavior suggested he'd learned a lesson. The local bar association took no official disciplinary action, but the incident lingered in the public consciousness as a cautionary tale about judicial arrogance. Months later, Ms. King visited Redwood Estate on a mild summer afternoon to finalize some personal matters. The caretaker escorted her through the grand halls. In an old drawing room, she found a trunk of her grandmother's keepsakes, embroidered linens, a diary, a silver brooch. She sat on the dusty floor, flipping pages of the diary, tears sliding down her cheeks. She felt an odd sense of closure. She'd reclaimed not just a piece of property, but a lost connection to her father's lineage. At length, the caretaker said softly, "Ms. King, there's a visitor at the gate. Says he's from the courthouse, wants to see you. Should I let him in?" Surprised, Ms. King stood, curiosity piqued. "Yes, please." Within minutes, the caretaker let in none other than Judge Reddington, in plain clothes, hat in hand. The caretaker left discreetly, giving them privacy. Ms. King blinked, heart tending. The judge, so formidable in the courtroom, now appeared almost humble. He nodded awkwardly. "Good afternoon, Ms. King," he said, voice subdued. She closed the diary gently, standing in the ornate hallway. "Good afternoon, Your Honor," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. He sighed. "Please, just call me Rudolph or Mr. Reddington, if you prefer." He paused, glancing around at the mansion's grandeur. I came to apologize. In person. It's overdue." Her eyes widened slightly. She motioned for him to join her in the drawing room, gesturing to a pair of antique chairs. They sat. Silence thickened until the judge cleared his throat. "I realize my behavior in court was unprofessional. I dismissed your story without giving you a proper chance. I was so sure you were spinning a tale. I let my pride overshadow impartiality. When the truth came out, I felt foolish. I want to say, I'm sorry." Ms. King exhaled slowly, studying him. "I appreciate that, Judge Reddington. It took courage to come here." A pause. What prompted this visit? He looked down at his folded hands. The media backlash was part of it, but mostly, I reflected on my oath as a judge, to seek justice, not to let personal biases hinder me. My daughter, ironically, scolded me after reading the news. She said I'd grown so cynical that I forgot empathy. She was right. Another moment passed before he added, "I also realized I tarnished your dignity in open court, which was unfair." She nodded, a swirl of emotions in her chest. "Well, I can't lie, it hurt. But we all make mistakes. If you genuinely regret it, that's enough for me." He gave a small, relieved smile. Thank you. I do. And I see now how quickly I labeled you a liar or fantasist. The law should protect the innocent. Instead, I harmed you. I hope you can forgive me. Ms. King felt tears prick her eyes. She'd never expected such humility from him. I accept your apology, she said softly, standing. He rose as well, head inclined in gratitude. They walked together, meandering through a corridor lined with ancestral portraits, silent watchers of generations past. The judge glanced at the paintings. Your family is quite storied, he murmured. She shrugged. Yes, though I'm only just discovering it. They paused at a large window overlooking the estate's gardens. For a moment, the judge seemed lost in thought, gazing at the sunlit rose bushes. Finally, he turned to her. Thank you for hearing me out. I wish you well, Ms. King. I trust Redwood Estate is in better hands now. If ever you need anything from the court, or if there's an official order needed to finalize your inheritance, don't hesitate to reach out. She gave a gentle nod. I will. Take care, Judge Reddington. He offered a respectful half-bow, then departed quietly, leaving Ms. King with a strange mixture of closure and compassion. She remained by the window a moment longer, reflecting on how life had twisted. One day scorned in court, the next day validated, culminating in an apology from the very judge who mocked her. The moral was plain. We must never assume we fully know someone's story, and those in power should wield it with humility. Ms. King left Redwood Estate that evening feeling lighter, as though a circle had closed. In the broader community, her story lingered as a cautionary example. Judge mocks a defendant. The court gasps when she reveals her secret identity, wrote one sensational headline. But beneath the tabloid flair, people gleaned a deeper lesson. The justice system must remain open to the possibility that even unlikely claims can hold truth, and that arrogance from those in authority can lead to grave miscarriages of justice. Ms. King's new role as part of the Farnsworth legacy included philanthropic oversight. She used that platform to champion fairness in local courts, funding legal aid for low-income defendants to ensure no one else was browbeaten without representation. The caretaker, seeing her generosity, marveled at how the Farnsworth name might gain a new reputation under her guidance. Months later, Ms. King hosted a small charity gala on Redwood Estate's grounds, proceeds benefiting a local legal aid foundation. Lawyers, judges, community leaders attended. Even Judge Reddington received an invitation. Rumor said he came quietly, donated a sizable amount. Ms. King gave him a polite greeting, no animosity, only a cordial handshake. Observers noted the mutual respect that had grown from a once hostile dynamic. As the gala concluded that night, Ms. King strolled the estate's garden paths, inhaling the floral scents under a moonlit sky. She recalled the day she stood, trembling, at that courtroom podium, harshly dismissed. She felt triumphant that she overcame it with dignity, proving her lineage and purpose. The hush of the garden comforted her. She gazed at the old oaks her father once described, grateful to have reclaimed her heritage. Then she returned inside, greeting well-wishers, strong and certain. She was no longer the defendant the judge mocked. She was Cassandra Farnsworth King, rightful steward of Redwood Estate, carrying a lesson for all about humility, perseverance, and the potent truth that identity can't be judged on outward appearances alone. And so, the moral rang clear. Never judge someone's story by your first impression, for you may find yourself stunned when their secret identity or deeper truth comes to light. And for Ms. King, that truth had made the entire court gasp, but also set her free.